The 1970s was a decade when American cinema stripped away the polish of law enforcement. No longer were detectives clean-cut guardians of justice. They were scarred, compromised, and sometimes as dangerous as the criminals they pursued. In this countdown, we uncover 12 gritty police procedurals that broke rules, shocked audiences, and forever changed the way we viewed cops on screen. 12. The Onion Field, 1979. Some crime stories end with justice served, but The Onion Field ends with despair. Based on Joseph Wambaugh's acclaimed book, this haunting film dramatizes the true story of LAPD officers Ian Campbell and Carl Hettinger, kidnapped in 1963 by two ex-cons. Campbell was shot dead in a desolate onion field, while Hettinger survived, only to face a torment worse than death itself. James Woods delivers a terrifying performance as Gregory Powell, the killer who views life as expendable. His chilling nonchalance during the kidnapping makes him one of the decade's most disturbing villains. John Savage plays Hettinger, a man who lives but cannot escape the crushing guilt and humiliation of being overpowered. The film isn't about chase sequences or shootouts. Instead, it lingers on the psychological aftershocks of violence, the survivor's shame, the community's judgment, and the justice system's endless delays. Trials stretched on for years, forcing Hettinger to relive the trauma again and again. His once promising career collapsed, his health deteriorated, and he withdrew into despair. The movie's refusal to glorify police work was radical for its time. Instead of showing the badge as a shield of honor, it depicted how a single night could dismantle a man's identity. When released in 1979, audiences and critics were unsettled. This wasn't entertainment in the traditional sense. It was an unflinching study of trauma and institutional failure. By stripping away the glamour of law enforcement, The Onion Field asked a terrifying question. What happens when survival feels like the worst punishment of all? 11th Prince of the City, 1979. If Serpico exposed corruption, Sidney Lumet's Prince of the City revealed the cost of confronting it. Based on the real-life saga of narcotics detective Robert Lucci, the film dives into the moral abyss faced by cops trying to navigate loyalty, justice, and self-preservation. Treat Williams stars as Detective Daniel Cielo, a man recruited by federal investigators to help expose systemic police corruption. At first, Cielo insists on one rule: he won't betray his closest partners. But the deeper he digs, the more impossible that promise becomes. The film unfolds with meticulous detail: sprawling interrogations, endless tape recorders, bureaucratic negotiations. Lumet isn't interested in glamour or action. He forces the audience to experience the exhausting grind of dismantling a corrupt system from within. Williams delivers a performance of rare intensity. Cielo isn't a clean hero or a villain. He's human, paranoid, guilt-ridden, desperate to protect his friends yet trapped by his own compromises. The more he cooperates, the more he realizes that truth itself can destroy him. Lumet paints a picture of a man consumed by betrayal, not only of his colleagues, but of himself. Upon its release, critics hailed it as one of the most complex procedurals ever filmed. Some officers despised it, claiming it painted cops as inherently corrupt. But others praised its honesty, calling it the truest depiction of police politics ever captured on screen. Prince of the City isn't about heroes or villains. It's about a gray zone where every choice is poisoned. In that gray zone, Lumet found a devastating kind of truth. 10. The Choir Boys, 1977. Most cop films of the 1970s focused on duty, obsession, or corruption. The Choir Boys, however, went further by asking, what happens when the job itself rots men from the inside out? Directed by Robert Aldrich and adapted from Joseph Wambaugh's scandalous novel, the film followed a squad of LAPD officers who gather nightly for drunken escapades they call choir practice. At first, the setup feels comedic. The officers brawl, prank each other, and engage in outrageous behavior. But beneath the dark humor lies something rawer and far more tragic. These men are shattered by the stress of their work. Instead of facing their trauma, they drown it in alcohol, cruelty, and reckless abuse of authority. Their antics may seem outrageous, but Wambaugh, himself a former LAPD officer, insisted this was closer to reality than the public wanted to believe. Critics were stunned, some appalled. The portrayal of police officers as vulgar, incompetent, and damaged was almost unheard of in Hollywood cinema. Some police unions called the film slander, while others argued it was a necessary mirror of law enforcement culture. Aldrich himself leaned into the chaos, painting a portrait of men who weren't heroes or villains, just broken souls fighting to survive their own despair. The film ends not with triumph, but with a sense of futility. It suggests that law enforcement, at least for these men, was less about protecting the public and more about surviving another day. In a decade where audiences craved gritty realism, the Choir Boys delivered something beyond grit. It delivered a vision of cops as human wreckage. It may not be the most celebrated film of the era, but it is one of the most haunting. 9. Night Moves, 1975. While often remembered as a neo-noir detective film, Night Moves operates like a police procedural stripped of uniforms and badges. Gene Hackman plays Harry Mosby, a former football player turned private investigator whose case spirals into tragedy. Unlike the action-driven thrillers of the era, Arthur Penn's direction emphasized confusion, missed signals, and moral decay, elements that reflected a society drowning in post-Watergate disillusionment. Mosby's investigation begins simply, find a runaway teenager. But the deeper he digs, the murkier everything becomes. Clues lead to half-truths, lies, and betrayals. The case doesn't resolve cleanly, because in Penn's world, truth is fragmented. Hackman delivers a performance of exhausted brilliance, less the heroic detective and more a man clinging to relevance in a world that's already passed him by. What made Night Moves boundary-pushing wasn't just its bleak tone, but its subversion of the very idea of resolution. Traditional procedurals were built on logic: follow the evidence, find the culprit, restore order. Here, every revelation brings more chaos. By the end, Mosby is left adrift, literally and emotionally, as he circles helplessly in a damaged boat, wounded and unable to change the outcome. Critics at the time admired its intelligence but struggled with its ambiguity. Audiences expecting another French Connection or Dirty Harry left frustrated by its refusal to deliver catharsis. Yet today, Night Moves is hailed as a defining portrait of 1970s malaise. In an era when Americans doubted government, police, and institutions, Penn's film suggested that maybe the whole system was unknowable, and that even the most determined investigator could never solve the riddle of corruption and betrayal. 8. Report to the Commissioner, 1975. Gritty, unsettling, and morally complex, Report to the Commissioner dove into one of the most controversial subjects of its decade: an undercover female officer's death at the hands of her own partner. Directed by Milton Katselas, the film cast Michael Moriarty as Bo Lockley, a naive young detective assigned to a case far beyond his depth. Lockley's investigation leads him to Patty Butler, played by Susan Blakely, who's working undercover in a drug sting. But in a tragic turn, Lockley doesn't realize she's an officer. A botched confrontation leaves her dead, an accident that sparks outrage and forces the NYPD into a cover-up. From there, the film shifts from standard police thriller into a searing indictment of bureaucracy, scapegoating, and the dangerous games institutions play to protect their image. What makes Report to the Commissioner so bold is its refusal to paint clear heroes or villains. Lockley is sympathetic but incompetent, a man out of his league. The department isn't overtly malicious, but it prioritizes survival over truth. In showing how quickly the machinery of law enforcement turns inward to protect itself, the film predicted controversies that would echo into future decades. Cinematographer Mario Tosi shot the streets of New York with raw authenticity, capturing a city on the brink, dirty, loud, chaotic, and unforgiving. The climax, set in a department store elevator, becomes a metaphor for being trapped by forces larger than oneself. Critics praised the film's daring honesty, though it never achieved box office success. Still, its legacy lives as one of the rawest depictions of institutional failure in the 1970s cinema. 7. Bustling, Milano Rovente, 1973. While America wrestled with its own police crises, Italy gave birth to the poliziotteschi genre, gritty crime procedurals drenched in cynicism. Among the standouts was Bustling, Milano Rovente, directed by Umberto Lenzi. Set in Milan, the film explores gang wars, corruption, and the blurred line between cops and criminals. Unlike Hollywood procedurals that still flirted with heroism, Bustling reveled in moral decay. The police are present, but they're less saviors than bureaucrats fumbling amid chaos. The real story lies in the city itself, Milan as a boiling pot of violence, where rival gangs battle for power while law enforcement struggles to maintain control. Lenzi, who later became infamous for his shocking horror films, brought a raw, documentary-like style to the action. The streets of Milan pulse with energy. Motorbikes weave through traffic, shootouts spill into crowded squares, and corruption infects every layer of authority. Where American audiences saw law enforcement as tarnished but reformable, Italian viewers saw something bleaker, a system too compromised to function. The film shocked international audiences with its brutality, but for Italians in the 1970s, it was eerily familiar. The so-called Years of Lead saw terrorism, organized crime, and rampant corruption. Bustling captured that reality with unflinching intensity, making it less a genre exercise and more a reflection of everyday fear. Though often overlooked outside Europe, Bustling helped cement poliziotteschi as a defining cinematic movement of the decade. It proved that the police procedural could be global, adapting to reflect each nation's deepest anxieties. Where New York films showed crumbling trust, Italian cinema showed the collapse of trust altogether. 6. The Laughing Policeman, 1973. Few procedurals dared to be as relentlessly bleak as The Laughing Policeman. Based on the best-selling Swedish novel by Maja Sjöwall and Per Wahlöö, this American adaptation transplants the story to San Francisco, giving it the grit and melancholy of early 70s urban cinema. Walter Matthau, best known for his sardonic comedies, takes a surprising dramatic turn as Jake Martin, a weary homicide detective investigating a horrific mass shooting aboard a city bus. From its opening, the film shatters any illusion of safety. A late-night bus ride becomes a slaughterhouse, with passengers, including an undercover cop, gunned down in a hail of bullets. The murder weapon is elusive, the motive unclear, and the investigation painstakingly methodical. Director Stuart Rosenberg refuses to glamorize police work. Instead, he depicts Martin's pursuit as endless drudgery, interviews, stakeouts, dead ends, punctuated by bursts of violence that offer no catharsis. What makes The Laughing Policeman groundbreaking is its attention to the banality of detective work. Where Dirty Harry thrived on spectacle, Rosenberg shows the opposite: tired men sifting through case files, chasing ghosts in a city that offers no answers. Matthau's Martin isn't a hero, he's a man ground down by years of loss, grief, and endless crime. Bruce Dern adds volatile energy as his brash partner, embodying the generational clash within the force. Critics admired its realism, but mainstream audiences found it too slow and too grim. Yet that very bleakness gave it power. The film anticipated the darker police dramas of the late 70s and 80s, setting the stage for shows like Hill Street Blues that embraced moral complexity and emotional fatigue. In The Laughing Policeman, there's no laughter, only the sound of lives shattered, both on the bus and in the precinct. 5. The 7-Ups, 1973. Often considered a spiritual cousin to the French Connection, the 7-Ups delivered one of the most gripping portraits of undercover policing in 1970s cinema. Roy Scheider, fresh off his supporting role in the French Connection, headlines as Buddy Minucci, the leader of an elite NYPD unit nicknamed the 7-Ups because their arrests guarantee sentences of 7 years or more. The film's narrative blends undercover drama with procedural authenticity. Minucci and his men use dirty tricks to take down mobsters, blurring the line between law and criminality. But when kidnappers start targeting mob figures, suspicion falls on Minucci's team, sparking a desperate hunt for the truth. The story reflects the era's obsession with moral ambiguity. Are these elite cops heroes, or just another brand of outlaw? Behind the camera was Philip D'Antoni, producer of Bullet and The French Connection. His eye for realism was unmatched. He shot on location in New York, capturing the grit of decaying neighborhoods with handheld cameras and documentary-style pacing. But what cemented the film's reputation was its legendary car chase, a nail-biting sequence through crowded streets, rivaling even the ones in Bullet and The French Connection. Though not as widely remembered today, the 7-Ups was praised by critics for its authenticity and intensity. Scheider gives one of his finest performances, embodying both toughness and vulnerability. Unlike Eastwood's invincible Harry Callahan, Minucci bleeds, doubts, and struggles under the weight of his choices. The film's ambiguity, its refusal to glorify its heroes, made it a standout in an era obsessed with blurred moral lines. The 7-Ups may not have the Oscar pedigree of The French Connection, but it remains one of the grittiest, most grounded police procedurals of its time. Its influence echoed in decades of undercover cop dramas, proving that justice often comes at the cost of one's humanity. 4. Magnum Force, 1973. After Dirty Harry sparked controversy in 1971, critics accused the film of endorsing vigilantism. The sequel, Magnum Force, responded in a fascinating way by showing Harry, Callahan himself, battling against vigilante cops who had taken his ruthless methods too far. Directed by Ted Post, the film expanded Clint Eastwood's iconic role into a deeper meditation on law, justice, and morality. The story centers on a series of high-profile murders. Crime bosses, pimps, and drug dealers are executed with clinical precision. At first, suspicion falls on mob rivals. But Harry uncovers a shocking truth. The killers are young motorcycle cops, trained marksmen who have decided to purge the city of criminals outside the law. The irony is unmistakable. Callahan, once accused of being too extreme, now becomes the thin line standing against total lawlessness. What made Magnum Force boundary-pushing was its refusal to double down on fascistic overtones. Instead, it turned the debate inward, asking whether unchecked police power inevitably becomes tyranny. Eastwood plays Harry with his trademark grit, but here he's less of a one-man executioner and more of a wary observer of how dangerous his methods can become in the wrong hands. The film's action sequences thrilled audiences, motorcycle chases, rooftop shootouts, and, of course, Harry's iconic .44 Magnum returning with righteous force. Yet beneath the spectacle there was unease. Could society trust the police if its protectors embraced execution as policy? Critics at the time were divided. Some still condemned the franchise as violent escapism, while others praised it for daring to critique its own myth. Today, Magnum Force stands as one of the most fascinating entries in the Dirty Harry saga. It's not just about bullets and bravado, it's about the terrifying ease with which authority can slip into authoritarianism. In making Harry Callahan the reluctant voice of restraint, the film left audiences questioning the very notion of justice. 3. Serpico, 1973. Few films captured the rot within police departments as boldly as Serpico. Directed by Sidney Lumet and based on the true story of Frank Serpico, it starred Al Pacino in one of his greatest performances. The story was not about chasing criminals on the street, but about exposing the criminals inside the system itself. Frank Serpico was a young, idealistic NYPD officer who refused to take bribes, a stance that made him an enemy, not just of gangsters, but of his fellow cops. The film chronicles his increasing isolation as he's ridiculed, threatened, and ultimately abandoned by the very men sworn to protect him. Pacino captures his descent brilliantly, transforming from a fresh-faced rookie into a disheveled, paranoid whistleblower. Lumet's direction amplifies the suffocating atmosphere of corruption. Dingy squad rooms, smoky bars, and shadowy hallways frame a world where loyalty matters more than law. By the time Serpico testifies before the Knapp Commission, the audience feels the crushing weight of a system designed to silence those who dare to challenge it. What made Serpico revolutionary was its timing. Released in 1973 amid headlines about real police corruption scandals, it hit audiences like a confession. Some hailed Serpico as a hero, others called him a traitor. The film sparked heated debates about whether exposing corruption weakened law enforcement or saved it from collapse. Pacino earned an Academy Award nomination, and the film cemented Lumet's reputation as Hollywood's foremost chronicler of moral ambiguity. Its legacy endures as one of the most important police procedurals ever made, a story not about solving crimes, but about surviving truth. 2. Dirty Harry, 1971. When Clint Eastwood first appeared as Inspector Harry Callahan, he redefined the cop film forever. Dirty Harry, directed by Don Siegel, was controversial from the start. Was Harry a hero for taking down criminals when the system failed? Or was he a fascist fantasy, a cop who trampled civil rights for the sake of vengeance? The film follows Harry's pursuit of the Scorpio Killer, a sadistic sniper terrorizing San Francisco. Inspired loosely by the Zodiac case, the story had chilling real-world parallels. Harry's relentless hunt, bypassing warrants, breaking rules, and brutalizing suspects, raised profound questions about justice. Could society survive men like Scorpio without cops like Harry? And could it survive cops like Harry at all? Eastwood's performance was iconic, laconic, fearless, with an icy stare that became emblematic of vigilante justice. His .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, became a symbol of brute force authority. The film thrilled audiences but terrified critics, who accused it of glorifying authoritarian violence. Pauline Kael famously labeled it fascist. Yet the controversy only made the film more influential. Beyond its politics, Dirty Harry set a template for decades of action cinema. The lone wolf cop, the violent showdown, the obsession with personal justice all became staples of the genre. Yet its genius lies in its ambiguity. Harry isn't celebrated without question. The film leaves the audience unsettled, wondering if his methods save or destroy the very justice he claims to defend. 1. The French Connection, 1971. At the top of the list stands William Friedkin's The French Connection, a film that shattered the rules of police procedurals and won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Gene Hackman's portrayal of Detective Popeye Doyle was raw, abrasive, and disturbingly real, a cop who was racist, obsessive, and barely in control, yet undeniably effective at bringing down criminals. The story follows Doyle and his partner Buddy Russo, Roy Scheider, as they chase an international heroin smuggling operation. Unlike polished crime thrillers of the past, Friedkin shot the film with a documentary-style grit. The streets of New York were alive with danger, graffiti, grime, and chaos filling every frame. The crown jewel was its legendary car chase. Doyle barreling through, city traffic in pursuit of a runaway train, a sequence shot with terrifying realism. But beneath the thrills was something darker. Doyle's obsession with nabbing his quarry consumed him, leaving collateral damage in its wake. The film ends not with a triumphant victory, but with ambiguity and failure. The so-called hero becomes a symbol of recklessness, embodying the flaws of a justice system stretched thin in an era of urban decay. Audiences were stunned. Critics hailed it as groundbreaking, though some recoiled at Doyle's brutality. Its realism influenced generations of filmmakers, from Michael Mann to television's NYPD Blue. By showing cops as flawed, sometimes despicable humans rather than noble guardians, The French Connection transformed not just the procedural genre, but cinema itself. The 1970s police procedural was not about neat endings or righteous heroes. It was about grit, corruption, and blurred morality, a mirror of a decade steeped in mistrust. These films changed how we see cops on screen forever. Like the truth itself, they refused to play by the rules.